herself is a contactee and a very gifted intuitive. She has amazing gifts and information to share with you from her contacts. She's written one book, Confessions of an Intergalactic Anthropologist, and it's available on her website, which is beyondzebra.com. And I've read her book. It's a fascinating book. It's well worth the time. I encourage you to read it. It's a lovely, lovely book. And she's an old soul, and I have to say that I know her from other lives. So anyway, this is Marcia Schafer. She's also Bob Dean's partner, and I'm not supposed to say that in the lead, I know. So I'm saying it at the end of my introduction. I want you to take note, Marcia Schafer. Anyway, and she is also an executive, I'm not sure how you term it, maybe an executive coach. I'm going to let her characterize that herself. Speak to me, Marcia, and let's make sure that your mic is working.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, Marcia, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you for having me. When Carrie first invited me, I said, you know, I'm not really so sure I should be here. I'm really not a whistleblower. I don't do conspiracy. And she said, no, 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 we want you to be a part of this. So I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. So with that, we were supposed to put in our biographies and our pictures. And I've got to tell you, I got a little bit upset because I didn't get it in on time. And Carrie and Bill went into the old archives and pulled something themselves. And I just thought it was totally inappropriate. But I'm going to let you folks decide as we begin to talk about metamorphosis. So this is what they put up of me in my bio. Marcia tried to rekindle her modeling career, but sadly, in the intervening years, everything had gotten a bit pear-shaped. So I learned to be on time with my stuff. Okay, what I'm going to start with is an old Vedic saying. Well, all right, it's not an old Vedic saying. I got it on the internet. But still, it's good, and it's worth sharing. And it's a story about the bull and the crow. And you may have heard it, but it's worth repeating, particularly here and today. And there was a bull in a meadow that was watching an old crow stumble along. And he saw that the crow had no energy and was really struggling. And he walked over to the crow and he said, "Crow, psst, come here. I know how to fix what's wrong with you." And the crow looked up at the bull and said, "What?" And he said, "You just have to do what I say, and you have to do it for 3 days straight." And the crow looked up at him and he said, "Well, okay." And the bull looked down and he said, "All right, you've got to eat that." Crow looked up at the bull and said, "You're kidding me, right?" Bull said, "No, Crow, you must, for 3 days straight." Crow said, "I am so not eating your poo, Bull." Bull looked down and said, "Do you want to get better? You must do it." So the crow said, "I'm dying anyway, what have I got to lose?" And for 3 days, he ate the feces from the bull. And at the end of 3 days, you know what? That crow got strong, and he was able to fly once again to the highest trees. So he took off, and he landed in this huge pine tree. And right below him, unbeknownst to him, as he landed on the branch, along came a hunter. And the hunter happened to look up, see the crow, go, "I hate those damn crows." Shot the crow. And the moral of the story? Bullshit can take you to the top, but it can't keep you there. And I thought that there's so many people crowing about so much bullshit these days that was the perfect thing to open up with. So, I mean, you know, look, everybody is nervous these days. You're hearing all this talk about 2012 and this old Mayan legacy that's been left to us, and people are scared that Armageddon is just around the corner. Earth changes. Should I head for the hills? Where should I go? Is there going to be water, food? Where should I take my family? People are giving you all their channeled information and their channeled prophecies and telling you that this is the truth and we must do what I am saying because it's coming from beyond. Extraterrestrial invasions, people are telling you that all sorts of things are about to unfold with extraterrestrials. So Crary was trying to tell you what I do, and I'm actually a business consultant of a very unusual type because I also use my psychic abilities and my experiences with extraterrestrial contact with people in over 30 countries, helping them become humanitarian pioneers. But I tell you, by the time they come to me, they usually look like this from everything that's going on. And it's a tough road to them to take. So as we begin to talk about things, what's really important to me today, and one of the biggest messages I can give you, is that we have to talk about what is truth. Because everybody tries to give you their version of truth. You know, who has the authority to say that they have the only version of it? Your job is you listen to each of us. Just because we're up here doesn't mean anything. And especially me. I have lived the life I'm about to tell you about and had the experiences I'm about to tell you about. I know they're real because I went through it. You don't know me from Adam. You don't know that. You have got to develop your discretionary abilities to a very, very high level. And just listen to everything and synthesize it into what may make sense to you as we go forward. Just because you think an extraterrestrial may be the source or some channeled angel doesn't necessarily make it the barometer by which you should live your life. So question me in particular and just look at it as a particular journey. You've all had extraordinary experiences or been exposed to them to some degree, or you wouldn't be spending $150 here this weekend, I can assure you of that. So you know that a lot of this stuff is going to be commonplace to some of you, but I just can't stress enough how important it is that you all really just put on your truth barometer and figure out what's right for you. So what my job is to teach you to think smartly. Because thinking smartly is a hybrid approach, and it is using both the intellect, the cognitive processes, and the wisdom of your intuitive knowing. And this may sound like some very nice New Age preachiness, but in my work with people as I'm turning them on, putting on their higher switches, this is something that we really get into. Because in the human condition, it's extraordinarily unique. The cognitive functioning, the intellectual reasoning that you have. When you combine that with your eternal soul mind and your eternal soul knowing, you have a very, very powerful tool to decipher reality. But we don't flicker them on together all the time. We use them separately or one at the exclusion of the other. So I want you to be thinking with your head and your heart at all times. Now, as we begin, we really need to be looking at, we're talking about God, the change and all these things happening. Are these changing times right now? To some degree, yeah, they are. But we've had change happening throughout history. But what's unique is that we've had change at an unprecedented level, particularly over the past 50, 100 years. Now, we've had beautiful green environments and healthy living, and we've turned around and we've trashed it to where our lifestyles are so polluted worldwide. Our food chain is tainted beyond belief. Our breathing is fouled by the stench of horribly putrid air, and everything that we touch basically is not in a very good spot. But we're talking about this weekend change on an unprecedented level that everybody's thinking this amazing thing is going to be happening and happening very soon. So is there really any change that's going on for us? Yeah, I say there is. I mean, you've got to make up your own minds. I know a lot of you already believe it, but I say there is. And I think there's on 3 levels. Now, as I said, I'm working with people in over 30 countries. These are not people who you'll necessarily see to your left and your right at a conference like this. These are everyday people who are beginning to have some very profound things happen to them, that they are waking up to a new degree. They're having paranormal experiences. Some are having extraterrestrial contact. And these are people that are in, whether they're a judge, a lawyer, an executive, a head of agency, a doctor, a biochemical researcher, a housewife bringing up 6 kids, a college student. I've worked from people from 9 to 93. One of my favorites is the 93-year-old. She sends me the dirtiest stuff on the internet. I just can't believe it. She's a hoot. But she's extremely aware. And she actually had a very prestigious occupation in her life. So something is going on in personal change because we've come from a very strong emphasis of getting more stuff. Going to Macy's, they're having a sale on Saturday, to really taking time out to find that inner focus and what is actually important to us. We're also seeing change on a social level. There are a lot of things happening where are the majority of people still going about not paying attention? You betcha. But there is a tremendous stream of awakening happening in everyday life, in every society, where people are again beginning to look at things very differently. And you hear so much about the young. They're still the same old kids doing the same old things that we did. But some of these youngsters are extremely wise and extremely aware and are talking about things that I just never talked about when I was young, and most of my friends didn't either. They're looking at life with their very sage elder eyes. They know what they want to do. They feel like they have a purpose to their life. At 8 years old, they're going out and starting businesses and beginning to do new things. But as we look at all this change, again, I want to remind you is that we've always had change. There was a time where we would see the Vikings coming on the shore and go, holy cow, sound the alarm. We would be afraid of the loss of our civilization and what was happening. This is just another phase in our development. But there's another aspect to change. There's planetary change. We're looking at things around us on the environment, and I was really shocked to see this on the New York Times, August 9th. This headline, some of you may have seen it, front page, climate change. Now, not only is it climate change, look at what's below. Seen as threat to U.S. security, Pentagon studies issue. Crisis may destabilize regions and require military action. Whoa! That's something you think you'd see on Project Camelot. So people are paying attention to some degree to the planetary change, even though some still try to deny it. But what is going on with this global warming? And is it something that's happening here on the planet, or is it something that could be further on beyond? Because we tend to stop when we think about things, and we tend to think about our direct parameters around us in the world. But what is going on out there in that unseen vast void of the universe? We think of the world like this, but there's all kinds of fields and properties around the planet that we really don't pay much attention to, that we need to be taking a look at, that could be influencing us from beyond the borders of our planet and what's going on. But at the fundamental heart of this metamorphosis and this change that's taking place is something that's a little bit different now. And it's not necessarily a 2012 prophecy. It's not necessarily extraterrestrial visitation. It's something very, very obvious and in front of us. And what is changing are the perspectives that people have. We are now able to look at things very differently because life has changed around us. So we have new tools of interpretation. Where when I first came out, I think it was 12, 13 years ago, to publicly talk about having a lifetime of extraterrestrial contact and what I learned, there was still a bit of trepidation on behalf of people. There were those people who said, yeah, I think it's probably true, I want to hear what she has to say, and there was still a great degree of people who didn't want to hear anything. But now, the majority of people are saying, well, I haven't had those experiences myself, but I think it's probably quite likely that it's out there. Because we've got media, we've got technology, we have all kinds of tools to help us reinterpret reality and what we've got going on around us. So we still have two camps. We have people who are looking at things at perspectives from the conventional eyes, the economy, finances, mortgage, institutions, politics, relationships, power brokers, technology. But then we have people like you who are looking at unconventional world in terms of what is it that science doesn't tell us? What is really going on with space and solar activity? What's happening out there with cosmic radiation? And how does it affect us? I mean, for gosh sakes, if a sun, an orb billions of years away, can turn my skin brown, then obviously if there's radiation fields and activity out there that I'm not aware of, it can influence me, and influence me at depths and levels I'm not aware of. We're redefining extraterrestrial realities. So many of you are having your own experiences, and we've heard different interpretations about human evolution and who we are and who we've been. Consciousness is taking a radical new leap as we're looking at it beyond Freud, beyond Jung, and into some new levels and some new depths as you're exploring who you are and what you can do. And certainly there's a historical redux of looking at our history on this planet and who we've been and who we can be. Quality of life is taking precedence over some other things that are there, like making money and having a 401k. And most importantly, there is a huge flow of your paranormal skill set being turned on within a subgroup of the population. It's not happening with everybody, but it's happening with quite a few. As you know in your own experiences, that you're able to see, know, and hear things and have extra abilities that were once relegated to Jean Dixon and just a few who are out there. So what am I doing with all of this information that has been given to me? Because as Kerry said, I've had, as some of you may know, kind of an odd lifetime. And I've had the opportunity to learn a lot of information, not from books, not from going to conferences, but from extraterrestrials and entities who aren't native to our planet. Now, I'll tell you, if I hadn't had these experiences myself, I'd be looking at that woman up there and going, she's whack. She's really, I just can't relate. But when they become personalized, then there's no doubt about it, about what's happened. And so I've had a very unconventional curriculum. And some of the things that I'm going to briefly touch on today in the time that we have are, I've been introduced to the soul life as a primary underlying force of our existence, and being made to understand that there is something more than just who we are. I've met the family in terms of many different species and races out there. I've been introduced to some new things about genetics, consciousness, looked at history in a way that hasn't quite been looked at before, and most importantly, that has given me the understanding of what we've done a lot here on Earth and why we don't understand things is a new interpretation of what we call time-space. This all leading up to what I've been taught is that what the future can be, and that the future isn't set in stone. And so what I've done is I am planting seeds of people around the world, rather than saying, buy my book, read my book, oh, I want to get on Oprah. Trust me, I do not want to get on Oprah, and I don't want anybody reading my book. It does not belong in Costco or any place like that. So, I've decided to work with people on an individual basis and giving them the seeds and the skills and the talents that they need to be successful to go forward and flower a new life. Now, obviously, in the little amount of time we have, I can't cover all those things, but I'm going to try to emphasize the soul life, our futures, and planting seeds, along with some of these other things. Now, when it comes to extraterrestrial reality, there's kind of, for those of you who haven't had the direct contact, there's kind of that let's do lunch type of attitude towards it. I get people calling me up or leaving messages saying, can you arrange, it's almost like Match.com, can you arrange for me to meet with an extraterrestrial with a list of attributes that it's like I'm running a dating service? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way at all. There are so many different races out there that unfortunately we tend to get confined to the beliefs that are fed to us by the media. So we're used to the little grays, you know, some channeled information about reptilians, but don't be limited to that. There are many, many different life forms out there. Some with classical types of civilizations and cultures, and some who are way beyond that. The slides that you're looking at now, these are life forms from here. This is life from the ocean. Now tell me, if that's not strange, you know, how can we kind of look at what's out there and say, gosh, it just doesn't fit into my paradigm of reality? I mean, we have all different types of life. And as I'm going to hit in on a little bit, is that it's all sentient, and what I've learned, it's all conscious. Because as I've learned through my contacts with extraterrestrials, they also opened up my capacity to communicate with the animal world and to realize how sophisticated they are and what they have going on. So as we look at life and surround us, we can't really say that this is really that much more strange. Now, I think we need to talk a little bit about their communication and what they have to say, because this is really important. What I want to do is I want to give you some of the benefit of the wisdom that I've gained from working with a lot of different races. You know, I think there's a joke in the universe. You know, it's kind of like, how does the chicken cross the road? How do you get a human to do anything? The answer is, play to his ego. Tell him he's special, he's an ambassador, we'll give him any appointment he wants, they'll do anything we want. And this is so true. You've so often seen people who've been so enamored of having, whether it's a channeled situation or they've had a contact face-to-face situation, and they get some information, and they go running out, you know, they want to be on a talk radio show, they want to be in the media, and we're going to have contact on 3 p.m. on August 12th. It'll be a media going by, and if you look really hard, you'll see them. Over and over again. Never happens. And so what I have found, whether we like it or not, I feel that there's almost like a fraternity hazing that goes on with some of us who have this type of situation. Because when you find you don't necessarily fall into that, and you question what's going on, and you try to wake up your cognitive processing as you're in this sometimes fugue state as you're with them, they give you respect when you act a little differently and you show you're independent and you don't necessarily fall in line. In my situation, what I encountered was all of a sudden I began to receive some very advanced teachings about life, reality, humans, what I call the wisdom track, and I felt very privileged to be able to get that. So when you have the privilege of having an extraterrestrial encounter experience, what I want you to know is that you can often fall into a type of fugue state, and it's like your soul mind is coming on and becoming active, but you need to keep that intellectual process open and keep your cognitive mind on and question and not just accept things as they come to you. And that's going to really make a difference. You know, think about it. It's like when we work with, our researchers work with gorillas, and you've heard of Coco, the famous signing gorilla. You know, if you walk in, you're starting to work with Coco, and all of a sudden, she doesn't just say red ball, she says, I want carrot cake for dinner. You're going to go, whoa, I can go to a whole new level with this being. And you can teach her in a more sophisticated level. And really, folks, that's what it's like sometimes with us, is that when you go to a new level, they do too. Okay, what I want to do is share with you some of the messages that they often bring, because now I've told you to question their messages, but what are some of the ones that they can share? You hear from everybody who's had contact. They'll talk a lot of times about environmental concern. Sometimes they'll have very personal messages for people. Excuse me. But one of the things that happened to me after over 5 decades of contact is when I was in my 40s, I had a very, very profound and very different visit that changed my life. And it was 1 week after what many of you here may know as the Phoenix Lights that happened on March 13th, 1997. I live in Phoenix, and I really didn't pay any attention to them, even though they happened over my house. But I had a contact visit a week later where they made reference to that. And they let me know that they had been there. But what they had is, I'm going to distill it down, it was a very profound, very long visit, but I'm going to distill it down to 3 particular messages, knowing that they have entrained me to understand that the future is nothing more than a probability. The future is mutable, and they have helped me to understand, and this is so important for all of us, that the future can be whatever we will it and want it to be. And that's why we have to be so much, behave so differently and become empowered. They talked about 3 things. They did talk about that there was going to be what they called a triune setting. That at some point in the future, and I got to stop and tell you, this drives me nuts, because the future, what, next Thursday, 3012? Time is different to them. They never really pin it down. But at some time in the future, that there was going to be what they referred to as a portal opening that would have great significance for us. Now, I don't really, get very involved in the 2012 phenomenon. I'm very involved in today and just moving forward. But I wonder, because there's such a great astrological configuration happening on that date that everybody's talking about, if that's what they were referring to. But some point, they said this really does have significance, because it's an opening in and out of our galaxy and our particular place in the universe that has meaning. And it doesn't happen but very rarely, probably thousands and thousands of years. They also made reference to that in our time, there was supposed to be the discovery of records that would reveal a very different history on our planet. And they showed me pictures of what I thought were the Egyptian pyramids and the Sphinx in that area. And they said that when these are revealed, there will be no refuting the history of the extraterrestrial legacy. I can't imagine what would be on it, because you can refute anything and just say that it's myth and story and culture. But they said that there was something there. I'll tell you, since that happened over 10 years ago and that particular visit happened, I also now wonder something very differently about this. And I wonder if actually this may not be Egypt, but it may actually be a part of the ancient Atlantean lands that are down by Bermuda and Florida, being able to rise up and have some of these monoliths on them. It's just a thought that I've had. The third thing they said is something that they don't want to have happen. And at that time, they were very, very concerned about a nuclear detonation going off in what seemed to be the Middle East region. So far, 10, 12 years later, we're doing good. It hasn't gone off. But what they said was that it's going to be a very naive situation should the nuclear detonation take place, because that there's a major fault line. And if it does, it's going to trigger this, and therefore it's going to affect the quality of life for everyone on your planet, and it won't be contained to a particular singular region like you saw when you detonated the bomb before. So these are the nature of some of the messages and some of the things that they can tell you and share with you. Now, I'm saying this because, are these true? I don't know. I find them fascinating, I find them interesting, and I'm very proud that I've had the privilege to hear them from them. But I also know that it doesn't mean that any of them are necessarily going to happen, that they're potentials for our future that can have greater bearing on us and what comes to fall for us. The other thing they shared, and I know I'm going fast, but I only have so much time, and so I'll be available later to go into greater depth to all these things, is that they told me about our past in a very different way. And what they did is they said that, yeah, you were a genetically altered species. And I learned about this way before any of this came out into the New Age culture. They said that it's a little different than you think, though. They taught me about Zecharia Sitchin, who many of you have heard of, before I was even aware of who the man was. And they told me to go explore his work, because they said he's very close to what it was. And they said, after I explored it, that you're a hybrid race, but it's not just that you had this Anunnaki coming here who created you. They said what it is you're actually a mixture of 12 genetic strains of what we would call extraterrestrial DNA. And that when the life form was tinkered with, it wasn't one culture or life form overlaying its presence, it was a genetic mixture. And they went into some very interesting details about it with the science that was used, where what I call harmonic or sonic resonance was used to, this may sound like total meta poop, I know, because I have a scientific background, but it's interesting, so I'm going to share it. And they said that a sonic resonance, they used actually sound frequency when they were doing the genetic tinkering to get the strains to gel and to work with each other. So what all this does is it allows us to look at what we know with new eyes and to think, well, maybe that definitely could be. And hopefully what it will do is will eventually entrain conventional, traditional science, the renegades who are working within the fringe, to start looking along these new lines, because we know that it's not a question of Darwinism or creationism. Both have aspects and flaws within them, that it's something else, and it's probably not just a third alternative, but multiple. And when you look at extraterrestrial presence on this planet, and the fact that there was probably genetic tinkering, it certainly seems to make a lot of sense to me. What is really intriguing to me is that how they went about all of this and the way that they gave me this really unique curriculum. Because it wasn't necessarily sitting down in a lecturing situation. It was a lifetime of experiences that I had that I couldn't synthesize and didn't realize that they were all coming together to have a focused meaning until I was in my 30s. And I'd been going through this since I was in the crib. What they did was they actually took me to experience certain things where I would actually be taken and I'd be witnessing, and I don't know whether it was a hologram or a point in space-time that was in the past, but I'd be witnessing and looking at a group of workers who were working under another race, which I now later realized they were showing me that man actually had been used for some slave potential on this planet and had been harnessed for his capacity to help, well, help is a generous word, isn't it, to help another species. So the point is that it's not what you expect, and it's not like going to Starbucks, and it's not like just sitting down and they teach you, that they can have a very unique process to get you to understand a new system of reality and a new way of thinking. And it can be very, very experiential. So those are just some of the things that I have been through with them. What I'm most interested in now is not really what's going on with me, but what's going on with the culture and the way that we're trying to get this out. And if you look at, I love this ad from New Mexico. The New Mexican tourist industry got a lot of flack for this. The best place in the universe, New Mexico Earth. And if you look closely, you see that they've integrated the extraterrestrial persona of their state in there, which I think is very intriguing. And if you go along now and you go into the modern culture, people, as I said, are really accepting more and more of what's out there. Am I going crazy? Was this place Korean just last week? You know, this is pretty much what we're looking at and what we're facing. Okay. So, you know, as I mentioned before, what for me has been really beneficial about the extraterrestrial contact is that it's given me new insights into not just human behavior, but something bigger. And it's given me insights into where humanity fits within other species. You know, because in some ways we are just those crazy flesh-eating mammals with herd-like tendencies. And we tend to forget that. And we tend to put ourselves at the top of the apex of that we are the ultimate supreme species and we are a deity. What I've learned through how extraterrestrials communicate, because they use holographic processes, they will often send an image to you that has an accompaniment of instant knowing. And that this goes on in the animal world too. And that interspecies communication is somewhat universal. And that human beings use language and ordered thought processes that does not seem to be communal to the rest of what is out there. And when we begin to penetrate into the species that are here beside us and the animal kingdom and understand how sophisticated their thought processes are and how much they know of what goes on and that they have their own cultures and relationships with each other, and they're not that different from us. It allows us to integrate better with the concept of extraterrestrial reality. Because I tell you, people are much more likely, not you, but the average person is much more comfortable looking at a fuzzy little animal who talks than extraterrestrial reality. And since I do both, let me tell you, they like the ordinary people like the fuzzy little animals a lot better. So what you'll learn and what the power of us, and I love what Gandhi had said, you know, people put it at the end of their internet messages that the moral fiber of a nation is judged by how it treats its animals or something like that. That really is at the underpinning of our moving forward, is understanding that we are a collaborative species, that humans are not cut out apart the way that we set ourselves to, that we have to understand that we're one of a multiple order. And that order, while it goes off into the space realms, has to start right here at home. And we have to start paying better attention to what goes on in the planet and how we are treating our animals. Now, I said I had an interesting curriculum. And one of the very profound things that they started early with was the concept of reincarnation. Now, much of the world, I mean, you ask any Buddhist and, you know, they say, sure, no problem, got it, it's part of our culture. The Western world still has a problem with this. Reincarnation is something that, while there is a lot of different type of evidence for it, can't always necessarily be proved empirically. But what they did with me is starting when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, they would come at night and I'd be pulled out and I would sit there and I would watch myself in these different existences. And I would watch and I would see myself as I was a tall, thin black man in ancient Africa who was swept upon by a leopard and became part of the food chain. I saw myself as a slave in ancient Egypt. And I looked down at my feet and I saw the hard ground that I slept on and the straw. I saw myself as being buried alive with a man who was my husband because I was part of his property. All these things where I was dying and had left my body because they were trying to get across the idea that we have an eternal soul and that they needed me to know not to be afraid, that no matter what happened in this lifetime, that wasn't it. It's a part of the journey. And with that, I was able to go forward and tackle life with a very different perspective than if I had been terrified and afraid, ooh, I'm gonna die. We're all gonna die, we just don't know when. You know, and we've been born, we've lived, we've died time and time again. We just don't tend to remember it. When it comes to reincarnation, what I think is so important about it is that not only does it remind us of the eternalness of our being, but it allows us to sometimes look at life with some new eyes and provide some different answers. One of the things that I was left with is the ability to look at somebody and I can immediately see their soul and I can see the trail of the reincarnations that they've had. Now, a lot of people say, well, we shouldn't get caught up in it. Excuse me, we belong in the here and now. And I agree in that wholeheartedly. But sometimes it gives us different eyes to look at things differently. A woman I worked with just a few weeks ago, and as I talked to her and explained to her the most prominent series of visions around her was one in the 1800s in England, and how she was involved in the early labor union development, and how the smog and the soot just assailed her and she couldn't stand it. And she was so frustrated by what was happening with the businesses and how they were taking advantage of the people at that time. And at the end she laughed and she said, well, not so sure if there's anything to this or not, but I actually got my master's degree in studying labor law in England and I have a real issue with the pollution. And you will see that there are commonalities and carryovers and tie-ins. And usually the lives that surround you now are often the leftover issues that we're still dealing with, that we pull together. And if you can pull it together with your soul purpose and go forward and integrate it into your life as you move forward, then your work life can become your life work. So for me, the experience of working with the extraterrestrials and the whole journey of reincarnation had a real profound impact, because it wasn't just about my journey, but it was about working with other people's journeys too. So yeah, we can't get caught up in it, It doesn't really matter if you were Genghis Khan or Cleopatra, who cares? But what really matters is what is your personal journey and what do you have to do now as you go forward. Now, leading to this and that we're eternal beings, the most important thing I've gotten from these experiences is that there is actually a science of the soul. And a lot of the things that happen to us are because of this. But as humans, well, if we're not even acknowledging that there really is a soul, how are we going to begin to even uncover and untap this science? And I've learned some fascinating things from them. Now, this is where you put your hat on and decide, even though I'm speaking authoritatively, don't let it fool you. You have to decide for yourself whether it's true or not. From what I have learned, the human being is a unique experience that's a symbiont experience, that there is this energetic, electric residue, if you want to call it, that comes in and binds with the biological unit. And there are two dual operating systems that coexist, which I think is interesting because if you know anything about the human body, you know you have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems which work together. One controls the powerful things like blinking, heart beating, respirations. The other one says, I think I'm going to move my hand and stroke my hair, and I want to eat, and I'm going to do some more complex operations. Apparently, there are two systems that learn to coexist in our systems, in our body. And one is the one that is related to the biological unit. And when we become activated, and our soul gets turned on more as a primary listening point, then that operating system comes into greater power, and it gives you greater discipline, and it gives you greater understanding and greater control to move forward as a more evolved, willful human being. Now, there's a whole, obviously we don't have time for this, how the soul binds and how it separates, but the one interesting thing that I think is really pertinent that I want to mention is that a lot of you have heard about with extraterrestrial experiences, people become paralyzed and they can't move. What they showed me is that many of the races know how to actually disengage the soul from the biological unit, and that oh crap, I forgot I'm on film. All right, well, I'm saying this publicly. What they do is, as they've explained to me, is that they actually can come in and through their abilities they can rotate your nervous system, and they can disengage it a little bit. And what they say is they just turn it a little bit so your synaptic junctions do not line up and you're not able to control your body. And therefore, that's where the paralysis comes in. Again, I don't know if this is true. I have some medical and scientific background, but not to that extent. But I think it's really interesting, and I think it merits further exploration as we look into the new types of sciences that we should be exploring. So, for those of you who have those paralytic type of encounters, oftentimes that's what happens. Or you come back from a lucid dream and you slam back into your body and you can't really move for a while. The alignment hasn't taken place. And the reason I'm sharing these types of things is that I want you to just look at life differently and say that there's many different explanations for all these crazy things that can happen out there. And some of them might make sense and might actually be proven if we move in the right direction in science. So there's this whole science of the soul that provides a lot of explanation for what happens and why it happens that we have yet to uncover. And once we do, things are going to make a lot more common sense. The other thing is learning about that space and time and dimensions don't coincide with our traditional understanding. I mean, why? The human has an orientation, and why we just don't get it is because we think linear. We think up, we think down. We think left, right, east, west, north, south. And because of that, we have to learn to think more inside and outside and move in a different direction. I'm going to go really fast now because I just got the warning sign. All right. I want to talk to you real quickly, let you know that with time, space, and reality, that there is something called a nodal point. And when you hear about people talking about attraction and things coming to you, part of it is tied into this. And what we are able to do is we're able to get ourselves to this cruxus of time, space, energy, where everything can flow out. And you can do this through your consciousness. And what happens is when you get yourself to the power of this nodal point and you start thinking in a conscious direction, you can redirect the flow of the futures that come to you. All right, so why are things happening now? Because, my friends, we have these new eyes and capacity to reinterpret the world. Life used to be like that. Life is now like this because we have technology. Technology has given us the insider course to the answers for many of the things that were not able to be understood before. And so our ancient alchemists are really today's modern scientists. So what I've done for that first part is I've given you a preview of what it's been like and some of the things that I've learned. Obviously, I can't dump 50+ years into the course of 45 minutes to an hour, but I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into what it's been like for me. But now I'm more interested in something far more important. It's not about me. It's about you. And this is what I want to spend the last 15 minutes talking to you about. You know, you all have come here and you've all talked to yourself about, you know, we've got this mission, we're awakening, we feel special. You have a new job assignment. And it's not that you're this great prophet or anything. You're really door holders. You're in concierge services because if you want people to think differently and be open to your ideas, you need to just gently introduce them to it in a way that's palatable to them. And that's what your responsibility is besides your own journey of awakening, you're also here for other people. This is how humans tend to see the world. They tend to see it in their suburban background, in their isolated houses, in their little communities, and in their cities, and they stay within their viewpoint. You never even get them to look up into the sky, hardly at all, to see what's going there. So they see ourselves as this contained globe. But how you see the world is different, because you see it with the power of metamorphosis and the power of change and of infinite possibility. And you know that what's been fed to us isn't necessarily what's real. So your new job description is metamorphosis, and that you're change agents of a new degree because you're dealing with extraterrestrial reality and human higher consciousness. And you have to do it in a way that you do not appear disenfranchised, you do not appear alienated from them, that they are able to listen to you and they want to listen to you. I mean, I've had this crazy background, I'm extremely far out, and I've been very, very successful walking into many different countries, many different corporations, many different businesses, many different people, and have been able to give people some very strong tools for progressing forward. And it's all about the way that we communicate and the way that we do it. So I need you to understand something about your audience because I want you to have some tangible tools as you move forward. This is who you're working with on the planet now, and I tend to call it alphabet demographics. L's, O's, and M's. Okay, the L's are what you'd consider yourself, enlightened luminaries. You know, you've seen it all, extraterrestrial, paranormal experiences. You're in tune with those who connect with you in the unseen world and the other side. You know, nothing phases you and you're well aware on the pathway. The O's are what I call the ordinary humans. These are the people who are still out there. They may be interested in what Oprah has to say. They think, oh, this is kind of interesting. And in that group is the emerging humans, And in those emerging humans, those are the people who are your target in terms of making headway with them. That they would be willing to hear you if you communicate appropriately with them. And this is what Carrie once interviewed me, and I called the swing vote. These are the people who are looking to know more about what's out there, are fed up with what they've been told because it no longer fits the world as they see it. But they need to have it packaged in a way that they can accept and is understandable to them. And this is where it is incumbent upon us to stop thinking about ourselves and, I do this and I read this book and I have this and have you heard about this? And to sit down, shut up, and listen to them. And to start understanding where they come from, acknowledging who they are, and it's not about you, It's about you extending your hand and saying, I hear you. You know, I have some things to offer. Instead of overpowering them with what we have encountered on our journeys and what we know. Because they have some extraordinary things to share. And these are the people who are going to determine our future. We, of course, do have the M's, the elementary man, who is what I call the fundamental, which I think is an appropriate word for them. These are the people who are greatly filled with intolerance because they don't want you challenging their paradigm. If you come forward with your ideas and what you know and the things we're talking about here this weekend, you've just violated their world and their sanctity. And that is something that they just won't tolerate and will create a very difficult life for you. I got this on the internet. I don't know who to attribute it to. It's one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen. You know, the world according to Americans, America, we're number one, we're number one. Eastern and Western Europe is, you know, pussies and communists. Coffee comes from South America. We only know Australia's kangaroos. You know, the polar cap's cold, Santa, you know. This is really how most America sees things, and I'd love to give credit to wherever it came from, but it came through anonymously. You know, evildoers, bombs go here, you know, Mexico and South America, they do our laundry and lawns. You know, and this is what we're dealing with, and you've got to remember, and you've got to respect, this is their world too. Okay. So your tools are, remember it's all about perspectives, and while this looks like a nice little design, this is actually elephant skin. And so your tools are to show people that it's not what it seems, there's something deeper underneath it. And so your approach is the new 3 R's, which is not reading, writing, and arithmetic. And this is something I work with people with great depth with, and this is important. You have to make yourself relevant. You know, if you're just sitting there on your commune and you're just, you know, working with your own little sphere, it's not going to work. You have to come into today's world if you really want to be a change maker. And you have to do things within today's 21st century and make yourself relevant to today's culture and society. You got to be realistic. You got to look at what you're working with for the second R. You have got to not just say, well, you know, the aliens are going to be here on Sunday, or I'm channeling them and you want to come hear them. You've got to be realistic with who you're working with and what you're dealing with. And you need to speak to them in those appropriate terms. But most importantly, my friends, you got to be relatable. You have got to be able to be somebody but they're willing to look at and to listen to, and not be necessarily bringing your stuff on them, but you're entering into their world. 2,000 years ago, you had a great teacher here, and though a lot of the teachings that were really relevant were lost, one of the things I will share with you, which you can dismiss or accept, is that there was a group that he worked with. And in this group, he taught them the ways of the common, ordinary man. He taught them about their behaviors, and he taught them how to go forward, not just in this lifetime, but in their future lifetimes, as effective messengers. Messengers who will open the door, messengers of change. And in doing that, you have to be relatable. As you read your old-time readings, you will read about the ancient Essenes, how they would change their robes when they went into town, so they matched what the people were wearing. So these 3 R's are things I want you to remember. And so, you know, the change that is happening, as I heard y'all talking about it before, is true. Enough with all the spiritual mumbo-jumbo, pal. What I'm seeking is real interchange, said the piggy bank to the guru. The change is us. When we change, everything changes. And it starts within us, each and every one of us, and it has a great cascading effect. Now, I've got to say this before I finish up. The other part of metamorphosis is financial. And that you have to realize that we're no longer these spiritual monks walking along with an alms bowl saying, you know, I'll teach you for a dinner. That we have a lot of hang-ups about money and finances. I mean, you know, it's particularly apt now because of the state of the world. And what we have to realize is that this is how we flex our collective arm on this planet, through financial maneuverings and money. It's not money that's bad, it's getting hung up on money. It's the key of loving money, of wanting, you know, amassing millions and billions and living for a 401k instead of quality of life. So you've got to get over this poverty consciousness of, I'm spiritual, I'm good, I'm poor. What is important for us is to be independent, functioning members of society, moving society forward. So it's the love of money, not getting caught up in it, but it is a critical tool for us to become financially aware and not have a hang-up if somebody wants to pay you for your services and that you have a right to earn a living. Okay, so it's down to spiritual economics, and what I want to show you is that it's no longer where we just used to be the wizard in the woods is what we were looking for this magic change, is that this is the everyday change agent now. And you may not like it, but a lot of you are actually still back in the traditional avenues making headway and making change. Not everybody comes to these types of things who are making a difference on the planet. And there's been a lot of people who are out there developing new businesses, new technologies, and doing the really hard grunt work that's going to carry us all forward. Sometimes they still look like they used to. But you know, with people and change, sometimes... Did the cable go out? Okay, where's the guy with the... Sometimes they look like this. Okay, so sometimes that businessman is really somebody very profound who's back once again. I do this. And so what I'm choosing to do with all the knowledge that I've had, rather than sitting down, writing books, and doing this type of thing, is I'm looking at people and I'm giving them very new tools to change. I'm helping them on our incarnational trek to become aware of who they were, but how it has relevance to today. Looking at their soul lessons and then repositioning them in a business type and entrepreneurial type of venture around the world, planting those human seeds of change and giving them the practical vision and skills that they need to be able to function in the world as it now exists. It may not be the one that you like. It may not be the one that you want. It's the one that we have. And so they're doing some very amazing things. And I love this quote: success in almost any field depends more on energy and drive than it does on intelligence, because this explains why we have so many stupid leaders. We're trying to get rid of the stupid leaders, and we're trying to put in the people who can make a difference and understand the synthesis of what is going on in the planet and that we need to move forward. What we're seeing mostly around the world are lifestyle communities being built up, different ways of bringing up and educating the children, food production changes, and a total re-education, such as you're doing here with Project Camelot. Now, as I get ready to leave you, I want you to know one thing, and this is what has been made very clear to me by those who visit us and those who teach, is that we are here together. We have a group incarnational lesson. And if we don't pull this off, things most likely aren't going to be as optimal for us as they could be. What that group incarnational lesson is, stop saying, you read Rarancha, you read Jane Roberts, I don't believe in this. We have to look at each other and see the soul lights within each other and see who we are as a collective group. And we have to truly, as cliched as it sounds, see the love in each other. We've got to stop being kind of pissy with each other and deciding, I don't like this, I'm judging this. We don't have time for that anymore. There is a very short time frame environmentally, it looks like, doesn't it, for us to make some things differently. And so it's all about seeing the soul light and networking with each other in a way that you never have before, making each other smarter. And sometimes that networking involves a little bit of a different partner, doesn't it? You really are your brother's keeper. This is what they've told me. That old biblical cliche is that in this time, in this frame, it has never been truer. And you have to take care of yourself, but now you are just as responsible for the other person. It's not, well, it's just my stuff and my path. And yes, I said it's up to each of us to change, to make the change. Now we have to form the chain link. Now we have to come out and work together and do it in a way that's very smart. And then the real secret behind all this, is if you want to make a difference, is people who do great things don't take no for an answer. They just go ahead and they forge and they find the resources and know what needs to be done. They also understand the power of kindness. And you'll learn that it's far better to be kind than to be right. And being kind in business and being kind as you go forward in your ventures has greater weight than anything else you'll ever do. And most importantly, we have to realize it's not an extraterrestrial that's going to save us. It's not an angel. People who do great things know that man alone has the power to work out his destiny in combination with his own intelligence, that hybrid approach again of the spirit, the soul, and the cognitive reasoning. So when we talk about thinking outside the box, we're now taking it to a new level in terms of what the box is. You know, and you folks already are thinking way outside the box. So when we look at metamorphosis, remember it's behind the change on this planet is a change in perspectives. And your ability to see things differently, along with other people's capacity to now listen to the things you have to say, is rooted a lot in science, technology, and advances bringing us to a new world. So I love to end with this saying is brave men earn the right to shape their own destiny by Arthur Schlesinger, and I like to put my own little twist on it to all my little sisters out there. Brave women earn the right to shape their own destiny. So I know, and I left out a lot because we had some difference in the time changes. I know I went fast in some areas, but what I'm going to say to you is I want to thank you so much for giving me the chance to bring you a little view of what I'm doing out there in the world to try to make a difference. And say, you know, I'm going to be here if you want to talk to me, get some more detail on the things that I just quickly glossed over. So thank you for allowing me the time to be here.
Thank you, Marcia.
Marcia, I think I'm going to employ you as a consultant to help me improve the quality of my visual presentations. That was so beautiful. I love those pictures.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
I'm making.